On July 18th of 1984, a man walked into his local McDonald's with multiple guns and yelled for everyone to get down. There were dozens of people inside, and what he did absolutely shocked a nation. This is the case of James Huberty. Hello, friend, and welcome to High Time Crime. My name's Joel, and on here I specialize in true crime and also moving incredibly fast through the space-time continuum. Whee! But anyways, today we're going over what happened at a McDonald's in 1984. You're going to learn about an evil man who one day randomly snapped. Also, I just want to say, I started a Twitter or X for High Time Crime, and I'll be posting about random things, true crime related. I think you might like it. For our story, we're heading to San Ysidro, San Diego, California. The history of the area is vast and dates back to the 1800s, but a group of people came here to settle officially in 1909. They founded a colony and named themselves the Little Landers. The motto was a little land and a living, and they thought that if people had a little bit of land, they could grow their own food and provide extras to other people in their community. Nowadays, if you're ever in the area, there's some good things to partake in. You could go whale or dolphin watching, and that's pretty spectacular. If you like trails, you could go to the Ojito Wilderness and get your hike on. Only thing is, there's no bathrooms, just the outdoors. Unfortunately, we won't be dolphin watching or going on a trail today while we're in San Ysidro. James Oliver Huberty was born on October 11th of 1942 in Canton, Ohio, to Earl and Estelle Huberty, and he had one sister named Ruth. His father at the time was a quality control inspector. Meanwhile, his mother was a stay-at-home mom. James was born with neck problems, and his head hurt a lot. The doctors told his parents that he suffered from some sort of spinal disorder. As a young child, he complained about stiffness in his neck, and this continued throughout the rest of his life. At age 3, James contracted polio, and he had to wear steel and leather leg braces until he was 8 years old. This left him with a limp that would never go away. It was also around this time, in 1950, that his father Earl purchased a 155-acre farm located in Mount Eaton, Ohio. James's mother, Estelle, didn't like that idea, and she refused to go live on the property. Within a few short months, she actually ended up abandoning the family to become a sidewalk preacher in Arizona. This made James feel absolutely terrible. Any kid would when their mother is there all of their lives, and then one day randomly, they're not. His father would constantly find him out sitting near the chicken coop, crying uncontrollably. James started attending Mount Eaton Elementary School in 1950, and he went here from 3rd to 8th grade. People remember him as having a short temper and not being much of an athlete. He was also bullied pretty relentlessly for having a limp. During these years is when his fascination with guns started because of his father, and he had a few hobbies. These consisted of target practice and chess. By high school, James became best friends with a guy named Charles, and they'd play chess daily. Charles would usually win these matches. James graduated from Waynedale High School in 1960, and his picture wasn't in the yearbook because he didn't want it done. In 1962, he enrolled at Malone College, where he started studying sociology. And while he was there, he met a woman named Etna. They'd later go on to get married. It wasn't long before he decided that Malone College wasn't for him, and he then started studying at the Pittsburgh Institute of Mortuary Science. In 1964, he graduated with honors and was given a funeral director's license. James then became an apprentice embalmer and was granted Ohio licenses to be an embalmer and funeral director. Within a year from this, in 1965, he would get married to Etna. Etna wanted him to attend the same church that her family loved and supported, so he started going. The pastor at this church said that James was a person with deep inner conflicts and that he was kind of atheist and bitter against God. Shortly after their wedding, him and Etna stopped attending church. James's supervisors at the funeral home where he worked at said he didn't like crowds or people in general. He worked there for about 2 years until in 1967, he decided that he wanted to become a welder. James then went to work for a firm in Louisville, Ohio for about another 2 years until June of 1969 when he started working at Babcock and Wilcox. He was making really good money, between $25,000 to $30,000 a year, which would be about $138,000 to $166,000 a year now. Not long after being hired by the company, him and Etna moved into a 3-story home located in Massacre, Ohio. In 1971, on the night of February 1st, it was a very cold night, below zero. James was working at the B&W plant, and Etna left home to go and get him. Well, she accidentally left something cooking in the stove, and, well, the entire house burned down. The married couple would then buy another house right next door, and eventually built a 6-unit apartment on the same property, and they managed this. In 1972, their first daughter Zelia was born, and in 1974, their second daughter Cassandra was born. Now, right off the bat, neighbors of James could tell that something was quite off with him, and they thought that he was weird. Throughout the 1970s, the Huberty's home contained multiple no trespassing and beware of dog signs, and James was just constantly paranoid. But he loved his German shepherds, and the Huberty family would bake cakes and throw birthday parties for them. The neighbors, however, hated his dogs. Betty Matechek used to live across the street from James, and she had a babysitter named Angie who was about 13. Angie said that Zelia and Cassandra used to brag about seances, and that they would consult with spirits about important family events, and that they also worshipped the devil. The young girls claimed that these spirits told them when they could sell their home and when they'd be allowed to move from Ohio. James was considered to be a man that held grudges. In the summer of 1982, he got into a feud with his neighbors, the Goodenoffs. This was Angie's family, one of the other neighbors' babysitter. This feud lasted for a few weeks to months, and on one of the days, the children got into a fight. This included Angie and her sister, and both of the Huberty girls. When James found out about this, he got incredibly angry and said that he would get even, and he for sure did. About 2 weeks would pass, and he was in his yard when he invited some kids over to have Cracker Jacks. James didn't typically do things like this, and once all of the kids were there, he went inside the house. Then his daughter Cassandra, or as everyone knew her as, Bobby, walked up to Angie and hit her in the eye. Art, Angie's father, went to James and asked him why he set up the fight, and he told him that he believed in paying his debts, both good and bad, and that he'll eventually get even with the rest of the kids. Within a couple of months, Angie's sister, Catherine, was walking down the sidewalk, and unbeknownst to her, James and Bobby were sitting in the bushes waiting for her. Once Catherine got close enough, Bobby jumped out and karate chopped her while James just sat there and watched. He was a very manipulative father, clearly. But Art and his wife, Angie's parents, went out to stop this fight, and so James called the police. For some reason, he wanted Art and his wife arrested for breaking up a fight between their daughters that he caused. Later into the day, James called Art and told him that one of these days when he least expects it, he's going to get him alone. A few years would pass and James didn't do much else to the Goodonoffs, or if he did, it wasn't reported. But the one thing that he did actually get a criminal charge for was in 1980 in Massacre, Ohio, and this was for disorderly conduct. He got into some kind of fight with a gas station owner, and he was ordered to pay court costs. Within about 2 years, in November of 1982, the Babcock and Wilcox plant was closed, and James was laid off from work. He managed to get another job on May 2nd of 1983 at Union Metal Factoring, and he only worked there until June 10th when he was laid off again. He told a coworker that he thought the president and government were trying to control inflation by laying people off, and that they were out to get him, and that if he's unable to provide for himself and his family, he's going to take himself out and everybody with him. James then got onto unemployment, and this is where things get progressively worse. He started to hear voices and became much more manic. Throughout the past 6 to 8-ish years or so, James was a bad father and husband. He would frequently slap or punch his daughters, hold knives to their throats, and this was the same for his wife, Edna. She one time filed a report saying that he messed her jaw up really bad, but I guess nothing was done. Starting in 1976, she really tried to get James to get some help, and she started being very careful not to do things to make him upset. Edna started using tarot cards to read his future, and James really followed what she said he should do with these readings. It kind of like hypnotized him. Like we touched on a bit earlier too, James was super invested into guns, and he thought that the Cold War was going to really escalate. Due to this, he spent thousands of dollars to stockpile food and guns. Due to this, he spent thousands of dollars to stockpile food and guns. He had so many guns that practically wherever he was either standing or sitting, he could grab one. By early 1983, James put a pistol to his temple in front of Edna, and she was able to stop him from doing anything. He later told her that she should have let him do it. In the spring of 1983, the Hubertys had to sell their apartment building they had on their property for $115,000. This whole ordeal and amount of money was problematic because apparently James was supposed to get more, and so he went to court about this. A few weeks later, James and one of his daughters were involved in a car accident, and his neck pain became more apparent, and his arms and hands started to tremble very badly. By September of 1983, he had to sell his house because he started to experience financial problems. He didn't want to, but had to, because his unemployment benefits ran out, and so he sold it for $12,000, and the guy who bought it, David, then overtook the rest of James's loan. During the summer of 1983, James and his wife applied for residency in Mexico. He wanted a fresh start and thought that Mexico would be a great place. By October of that year, they ended up moving from Ohio to Tijuana, and within literally just a few days, James regretted this deeply because he couldn't find any work. 3 months later, he relocated his family to San Ysidro, and they rented an apartment located at the Cottonwood Apartments. San Ysidro is a border town and located very close to Mexico, and so a lot of people here are Mexican or Mexican American. James hated that people spoke broken English, and he was very off-putting and rude to his neighbors and people in general. He hated everybody. While reading through a newspaper one day, he saw an advertisement for a security guard position. he decided to apply. By April 12th of 1984, he completed his training and was employed. His job was to guard a condominium complex. Within about 2 weeks, he relocated his family to a bedroom apartment and then started moving all the furniture from Ohio. Less than a month after being hired, on June 10th, James was fired from his new job. And the reason being was because he was a poor worker and was generally unstable. Within about a month or so, he would do one of the worst things imaginable. On July 18th of 1984, it was a cloudy day with a high temperature of 83 degrees. For the most part, this was a normal day, except for the fact that it wasn't. James Huberty had to go to court this day for a minor traffic violation after crossing over a double yellow line. He brought his wife Edna and their eldest daughter Zelia to court with him. He pleaded ignorance, and the judge let him off free without having to pay a fine. While on their way home, James suggested to Edna and Zelia that they go to the San Diego Zoo. He used his last paycheck from the security guard job to buy a year-long family pass to the zoo. Edna said that he was quiet and just looked at the animals, and there was no arguments, but she could sense dread coming from James. He told her at one point about how his life was basically over and how he tried to call the mental health clinic to be seen yesterday, but they didn't call him back. And so he said, well, society had their chance. The Huberty family then went to go get lunch, and they just so happened to go to the McDonald's, which was only about 200 yards away from their apartment. When the family got home, James started to get together some things. He put on camouflage pants, a maroon t-shirt, and got a 9mm pistol, a 9mm semi-auto Uzi, a 12-gauge shotgun, and hundreds of rounds of ammunition. He then wrapped everything into a checkered blanket. The shotgun he carried across his shoulder. Next, James went into the bedroom he shared with his wife, and she was just laying on the bed. James told her that he wanted to kiss her goodbye, and Edna said that she wanted to kiss him too. She then asked him where he was going and that she plans on getting dinner started. James then replied he's going hunting for humans. Edna ignored this comment because she thought it was all talk, as he said things like that several times before. James then started walking out of the house, and as he did, he saw his eldest daughter, Zelia. He then said to her, "Goodbye, I won't be back." He then got into his car and started driving towards the supermarket. Then he started heading towards a post office. But he finally decided on the McDonald's that was only 200 yards away. A bit after James left, Edna called the mental health clinic that James was waiting on a call back from. Apparently, he was literally waiting by the phone for hours the day prior, but he never got that call. And the reason being was because of the fact that they misspelled his last name. They had it in their system as Huberty. At about 3:56 p.m., James drove his car into the McDonald's parking lot. There was 45 total customers in the restaurant and a good amount of workers. When James first entered the McDonald's, he pointed his shotgun at a 16-year-old named John Arnold from about 15 feet away. When James did this, the assistant manager, Guillermo Flores, shouted, "Hey, John, that guy's going to shoot you." James then pulled the trigger, but nothing happened. The manager at the time was named Neva Kane, and she started walking towards the service counter where John was. John thought that James was just joking around, and so he started walking away. Then James shot Neva in the face and thus started his rampage. Right after, he shot John, who ended up surviving. Next, James yelled something about Vietnam and that he's killed 1,000 people and he's going to kill 1,000 more. This was the first time he's ever done anything like that, and he never served in any armed forces. After seeing what was happening, a guy named Victor Rivera tried to calm James down and persuade him to stop. James decided to shoot him 14 times, and as he cried out in pain, he told him to shut up. As he continued taking many people out, he yelled, "Come on, buy your burgers with the ketchup on it." Some people were able to hide in the basement and in various locations, and some people played dead. James then changed the radio from a rock music station to a soul music station. He took the lives of 17 people inside the restaurant, wounding 19 others. A lot of those people tried their hardest to protect children and their families, and so we have to commend all of them for that. Outside of the McDonald's, 3 11-year-old boys rode their BMX bikes into the parking lot so that way one of them could get some ice cream. As they were pulling in, someone across the street tried warning them to no avail, and quickly it was understood why. James shot all 3 of these boys, Omar Hernandez, David Delgado, and Joshua Coleman. Both Omar and David passed away at the scene, and Joshua survived. But in order to survive, he had to play dead and stay very still, all while suffering from a gunshot wound. Then an elderly couple, 74-year-old Miguel Victoria and his 69-year-old wife, Aida Victoria, were walking inside of the McDonald's. Miguel held the door open for Aida, and as he did, James shot her in the face and killed her. The shell also hit Miguel. Miguel began cradling Aida and cussing at James, so James walked outside, cussed back at Miguel, and shot him. Employees that were in the restaurant called 911, and so did other random people. They were dispatched to the wrong McDonald's, and this costed them anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes. Police would soon arrive on the scene and set up posts with snipers ready to go and a bunch of other units. They were advised to kill James if they had a clear shot. James went back inside of the restaurant and started changing the radio station again, and survivors said he changed it to news reports until eventually deciding on a music station, to which he started dancing. Then he began walking around looking for more people, and in the kitchen area there were 6 people. He killed 3 of them, and the other 3 managed to escape. Next, he went to the middle of the restaurant and continued looking for people. As fire trucks and police cars drove close to the McDonald's, James shot at them. Eventually, a 27-year-old SWAT sniper named Charles Chuck Foster, who was posted directly across from the restaurant on a post office, had a clear shot of James. Charles took that shot, and it severed his aorta, killing him almost instantly. His rampage was over after 77 total minutes of pure carnage and destruction. James murdered 21 people, one of them being a pregnant woman and many of them being children. He injured a total of 19, but also in reality, he ruined the lives of hundreds, if not thousands, of people. This includes the victims and their family members, first responders, and even his own children. James Oliver Huberty was a monster, and it's really hard to believe people like him exist, but they do, unfortunately. His wife Edna tried to sue his old company, Babcock and Wilcox, on the claim that James did what he did because of a poor diet and also working around highly poisonous metals with no protection. She also tried to sue McDonald's because James ate there a lot, and apparently the nuggets had monosodium glutamate in them, and she said that this induced his delusions and uncontrollable rage. In 1987, the lawsuits were dismissed, and Edna eventually passed away in 2003. As to why James did what he did, I don't think we'll ever really know. We can assume it's because he hated the world and wanted to watch it burn. He's where he belongs now, and I do feel awful for the 21 people that he murdered and the 19 people that he injured. The youngest one being 8 months old and the oldest being 74. Not one of these people deserved what happened to them. All of them were just trying to enjoy some McDonald's for either a late lunch or early dinner and had absolutely zero idea what was going to happen. They all went to a seemingly happy place and expected everything to go completely normal, and sadly, it didn't. I hope that the survivors and the families of the victims have been able to heal and find some closure nearly 40 years after this awful occurrence. Rest in peace to all of these angels. The McDonald's was torn down many years ago and turned into a college. A memorial for all of the victims was put up right where it happened, and it's a pretty nice gesture. Every year on the anniversary of the massacre, the monument is decorated with flowers to remember everyone. My last thing here is that the police really failed everyone overall. They got there about 5 to 10 minutes after the initial call because they went to the wrong McDonald's, and James continued shooting for well over an hour even when they were there. But anyways, thank you for watching this episode of High Time Crime. If true crime is your thing, then please subscribe and hit the like button because that's all we do. Recently, I've started an all-exclusive Patreon, and here you're given the choice of 3 tiers, and the last one allows for a Patreon-only video that's uncensored. Both that and the second tier will allow you to have your name at the end of each High Time Crime video. This is just in case you want to support me a little further. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Take care, friend.